The monitors that get heavy coverage these days are usually sporting some really impressive specs and are heavy on the buzzwords. Ultra-wide, IPS, 4K, 240 Hz. But the reality is that the majority of gamers just don't have the hardware to push all those pixels or to take advantage of that high of a refresh rate. Not to mention the disposable income to stomach the prices that come along with having the best of the best. 1080p is still by far the most common gaming resolution, and by most measures still looks great and provides an immersive experience. What if I told you that there was a company making a product with a healthy dose of those buzzwords like curved, 144 Hz, and FreeSync that you could pretty easily afford and that exceeds expectations? Well, that company is Pixio, and this is their PX325c. You may never have heard of Pixio. I certainly hadn't until recently. They're a fairly small company based out of California that was only established last year, but they describe themselves as gamers at heart, and their aim is to provide affordable monitors with the features that the majority of buyers are looking for. Their product line right now is fairly limited, with 2 1080p monitors and 1 monitor stand available for purchase, with a third monitor available for pre-order and hopefully shipping soon. Right now though, this is their flagship, the PX325c. Its spec sheet hits a lot of the markers that gamers value, like that sweet 144 Hz refresh rate. Even without FreeSync enabled, that alone is enticing, as high refresh rate gaming provides a smoother and more precise experience. FreeSync is built in, however, with a range of 59 to 144 Hz, allowing those with AMD graphics cards like the RX 580 the best gameplay experience. We'll dive into this in a little more detail in a minute. The 325c also has an 1800R curved 32-inch display. Now, curved displays are nothing new, and there are plenty of 21:9 ultra-wide displays with curves ranging from 2100R to 1500R, with the lower the number, the higher the curve. Curved 16:9 monitors are also out there, although given their smaller horizontal footprint, more subtle curves don't really make much of an impact to the experience. 1800R is a nice middle ground, especially with a panel of this size. Sitting in front of it at a distance of 2 to 3 feet makes you really feel like you're in the game. And the matte screen has a nice anti-glare finish and good off-axis viewing angles. Pixio touts a 170-degree horizontal viewing angle, which seems about right, although it doesn't do great at the outer bounds of this range. Still though, how often are you gaming while looking at your screen from the side? I don't think that's an issue at all. The display itself uses a Samsung SVA panel with a 4 millisecond gray to gray response time. I don't own a colorimeter, so I won't profess to have a purely analytical report on color accuracy. However, from using this monitor for a few days, I could say that I didn't notice anything that was obviously off. Colors looked as they should and popped nicely against all different backgrounds. Similarly, web page text was fairly sharp and readable without any noticeable lag or ghosting while scrolling around quickly. Now, while on the subject of the display, we do have to talk about my biggest concern with a 32-inch 1080p panel viewed at close range, and that's pixel density. No matter the price or supposed quality of a monitor, the number of pixels remains the same at any given resolution. So this isn't an issue specific to Pixio. 16:9 1080p will always mean about 2.1 million pixels. So if you cram them into a smartphone screen, you'll never be able to see them. By contrast, you can have a 60-inch 1080p TV that looks super sharp as well, just due to the 10 to 12 foot viewing distance. Monitors are a strange middle ground because they're usually on a desk right in front of your face, yet they're still fairly large. I won't pretend that I couldn't make out the pixels when looking at my desktop, with small icons and smaller fonts suffering the most. This also applied to word processing, so if you're going to be typing a lot of documents, you probably will notice this as well, especially if you're using smaller fonts. However, it's not like this made things unreadable, and when in-game, it's not something that I ever thought about at all. Pixio's PX245c is a 24-inch version of the same product, and likely corrects these minor issues just due to its size. 24 inches is probably the sweet spot for 1080p monitors, but despite my concerns, I was pleasantly surprised with how little I noticed it while gaming. The panel itself has only minor light bleed in the upper corners that was noticeable only in pitch black situations and with a fully black screen. Looking at a pure white screen didn't reveal any hot or cool spots. The menu system is fairly basic and controlled by buttons on the underside of the bottom right edge. It does an adequate job of directing you around, but isn't the best I've ever used. I don't think there's any real benefit to harping on this too much though, because for most monitors I've ever owned, I use the menu system once when I first get it to calibrate it, and then hardly ever again after that. However, the 325c does offer some features that you'll need to use the buttons to access, like game timer and crosshair overlays. Next to the monitor buttons on the backside, there's a plastic panel that snaps off and reveals the inputs. You'll find something for everybody here with DisplayPort, HDMI, and DVI ports, as well as an audio jack input. The bottom edge also features speakers that, as with most monitor speakers, I wouldn't recommend leaving enabled. They actually get pretty loud, but they sound not great overall, especially at the higher volumes. This isn't a deal breaker for me when evaluating a monitor, as the majority of people will be using a headset or a separate speaker setup. The included stand leaves a little to be desired, with tilt as the only available adjustment. Luckily, Pixio offers a universal VESA stand as a replacement that can be purchased as a combo on their website or through Amazon, saving you a few bucks. The P400 is a heavy-duty, extremely stable way to mount any monitor with a 100 by 100 or 75 by 75 VESA mount. It features height, tilt, and swivel adjustment, along with the ability to rotate a full 90 degrees. The feet are set wide but don't protrude too far from the front, so making room on your desk shouldn't be too much of an issue. I originally had the 325c mounted on the basic stand for my product shots, but this just looked so much cooler that I decided that it was the better way to go. Now let's talk performance. Why does 144 Hz and FreeSync matter? Your monitor can only display frames as fast as it can refresh, meaning that a standard 60 Hz monitor can only display at maximum 60 frames per second. With frame rates higher or lower than that, many displays run into what's called screen tearing, where the frames coming from the GPU fall out of sync with what the monitor is capable of displaying. The faster the monitor refresh rate, the more frames it can show you, and the addition of FreeSync technology makes the experience buttery smooth. For more on this, I'm going to toss it over to myself, who will have a better explanation and demo for you.
So in order to investigate this, what I did was shoot some footage of me just playing some games, imported it into Adobe Premiere, and we're going to take a closer look at it right now. First set of footage that you're going to see is of me playing Crysis 3 on my main gaming and editing system that has two 1080 Ti's, and I'm playing on my Dell 1440p ultra-wide productivity monitor. Now this is a fantastic monitor for what I need it for, which is video editing, color correction, things like that, because it's an IPS display, very accurate colors, but it's only 60 Hz. It doesn't have any adaptive sync technology. So when you see the gameplay, and I'm going to play back just a really small snippet of it right here, you'll see that it looks pretty good. This is just me filming my monitor screen with my camera. It doesn't look terrible. Every once in a while you'll see some tearing or something along those lines, maybe some abnormalities with some ghosting and stuff like that, but for the most part it looks pretty good. So while I'm playing the game and recording the majority of the screen on my main camera, I also had my iPhone set up on a small tripod fairly close to the screen, recording in slow motion. Now, why my iPhone? Unfortunately, it is the best slow motion camera that I own. My Lumix G7 only does 60 frames per second. The iPhone does up to 240, but for the purposes here, we're gonna go with 120 frames per second because it shoots that at 1080p. So I imported that footage into Premiere and I started scrubbing through it. Now, if you take a look at this footage, and let me zoom into the timeline here, you'll see that as we go through it and the action starts to get complicated, you'll see screen tearing. Now, like I said, this isn't something that you see a lot of during the game because for the most part, it goes by really quickly. But you can certainly see it if you're looking for it, and for a lot of people, it just kind of takes them out of the action. This can be distracting to some people, especially if you're used to running the game on a high refresh rate monitor. So while this monitor is really good for what I use it for, all this tearing is no good for gaming. Now we're hooked up to an RX 580 installed on our test bench, and we're filming the Pixio monitor. So once again, in real time, this is how it looks. It's going to hopefully look a lot smoother. I'm going to do a little swirly action right here just to simulate some fast back and forth. But as we run along, you know, this is the frame rates here were, I think, high 50s. They weren't even 60 frames per second at this point, which is why you want something like FreeSync to make sure the action stays smooth. You get no tearing, no skip frames, nothing like that. I think the highest frame rates that I saw with the RX 580 in Crysis 3 were high 70s, but those were in like indoor scenes where there's not a huge distance to render. But here we go with the swirling around. Let me actually zoom in here. We can go kind of frame by frame, and you can see that there's no screen tearing whatsoever happening, despite the fact that the action is very fast at this point. Simulated very fast because I'm doing it without actually having any bad guys to shoot, but still very fast because I'm moving back and forth. So then we have another couple clips just to look at. Same deal. This is it full speed. There we go. And that's an action that would normally get a lot of tearing. And we have the same clip slowed down. There we go. There I go. Moving around for this dude is like, why is my soldier guy spinning around like a madman? It's for science, dude. Leave me alone. No tearing at all. Good amount of blur, but that is just to make the action look smoother, because once again as we go back to here, you see it as we move around. It looks smooth.
The gaming experience on the Pixio PX325c with an AMD graphics card is nothing short of amazing. The action was completely stutter and tear free, with nothing to take you out of an extremely immersive experience provided by the large curved screen. As my daily driver Dell 3415W has limited gaming features and is more focused on enabling easier and more accurate video edits, switching over to a 144Hz FreeSync panel was a revelation. We've talked about the features of the 325c without even mentioning the price. You can get this on Amazon right now for $349. That's a 32-inch curved 144Hz FreeSync monitor with minimalist design and a quality Samsung panel for a bargain basement price. Similarly spec'd models from BenQ and ViewSonic are priced $100 to $150 higher, and those companies have been around forever and have huge established factories and manufacturing lines. For the price of the BenQ EX3200R, you could pick up the PX325c with the P400 stand and a new AAA title. That's a crazy bargain and should definitely factor into the evaluation of any product. Pixio has really hit a home run here. The 325c has some minor flaws but some major perks, and checks almost all the boxes when it comes to 1080p gaming displays. Even if you're running an NVIDIA GPU, the 144Hz refresh rate is a huge improvement over standard 60Hz panels. If you happen to own an AMD card and be shopping for a new monitor, you'd be doing yourself a disservice by not checking in on Pixio. What do you guys think about the Pixio PX325c? Had you heard of them before this video? Let me know down below in the comments. Also, don't forget to get subscribed to the channel if you're not already, and toss me a thumbs up if you liked the video. As always, thanks for watching.